Instead of a formal meditation this week, I thought I would pop on here and give you guys some informal practices that you can start trying out today. As I have said in many of my previous videos, informal types or practices of mindfulness is a great way to introduce this new skill into everyday life without actually having to change anything within your routine. And really what that looks like is bringing in a new type of mindset into everyday tasks as well as chores. So if you have been wondering about mindfulness and how the heck am I going to bring this new skill into my everyday life without actually setting aside 20 or 30 minutes to maybe disrupt my routine or set that aside, then you're definitely in the right place. So stay tuned for 5 different techniques that you can put into practice today. Technique number 1 is called a mindful transition. Repetition is a huge part of developing any skill, and mindfulness is really no different. So if we can identify between 1 and 3 transitions throughout our day where we can implement this type of mindful transition and intention into that activity, then we can start building that mindfulness muscle every single day without really having to change anything. And this small tweak, this small change can have a really big impact later down the road because our mindfulness muscle is being built along the way. Now, a few examples of what a transition could even look like is, anytime we go to take a shower or go to use the restroom, maybe walking to our car or dropping the kids off at daycare, any little in between of those different tasks or chores that we have. So think of something that you do every single day. Really, it could even be anytime I fill up my water bottle. And that is where you can start putting this one into place. So when these transitions come about throughout your day, go ahead and put these steps into place. For 1, bring your attention to your breath. Notice what it feels like to be breathing right now. Bring attention to the state of your mind and your body, and notice what emotions you might be feeling. Breathe deeply as you notice these things and take a really deep breath in and allow a sigh to escape on the exhale. This can feel a little bit silly to do on our own sometimes or when other people are around, so I'll go ahead and do one with you. Technique number 2 is bringing in our senses. Checking in with our senses throughout our day can be a great place to start when we are just learning about mindfulness and really being in the moment. Because we have our body with us all the time, we have our breath with us all the time, and we have our senses with us pretty much all the time unless maybe we're sick. And because we have these with us everywhere we go, that means we can check in with them pretty much throughout any activity that we might find ourselves in throughout our day. Now, just to clarify, technique number 1 was implemented in the transition between 2 different activities. This technique is implemented during the activity itself. So whichever activity or chore that you might be engaging in today, check in with all that you see. Notice the different textures that you might be feeling on your skin, or perhaps textures of food if you're deciding to implement this during a meal. Notice all the different flavors that you might be tasting or scents that you might be smelling. And of course, notice what you might be hearing as well. Just try to notice as much as possible. Really get in tune with what's going on around you through the use of your senses. Technique number 3 is all about grounding. This one can be especially helpful in times where we notice maybe we're inside of a vicious, unhelpful thought spiral, or our inner critic is yelling at us pretty loudly that we're just not good enough, or even when we're feeling just really strong emotions for any reason. As we start to increase our present moment awareness, we start to be able to catch these thoughts and catch these emotions, maybe even at the very beginning of when they're starting to bubble up. So when you notice these things starting to creep in and maybe even gaining traction with your internal experience, go ahead and follow along with these steps to move the focus from our mind into our body. Number 1 is take 3 slow, long, deep breaths. Step number 2 is to scan over our body and go through a bit of a progressive muscle relaxation. So what that entails is starting at the very top of our head, moving all the way through our body to the very bottom of our feet. And as we go through this scan, we're going to tense up our muscles intentionally, hold that for a moment, and then we're going to intentionally relax them. And as we go through that process, we get to start to pay attention to what does it feel like? What's the difference between these tense muscles and these relaxed muscles? And once you complete that whole body scan, then you can start to check in. How do I feel? What's the state of my mind? What's the state of my body? Do I feel a little bit more relaxed? Or am I still pretty tense? Do I want to go through this again? Just allow yourself to sit in this for a minute or two, noticing what it feels like to be breathing. Notice any sensations of relaxation. Notice what it feels like to be supported by the ground or by your choice of seat. And just allow yourself to actually be supported by whatever your seat might be today. If you'd like to be guided through a similar type of exercise rather than just kind of doing it on your own, I'll link one here for you. Technique number 4 is all about cultivating emotional awareness. Now notice how I did not say emotional avoidance. So whenever you notice that you are uncomfortable within your body, or you notice just really feeling a strong emotion, you can walk through some of these steps. First and foremost, take a couple deep belly breaths, really paying attention to the air coming in, how that feels in our body, and releasing that. Maybe even elongating our exhale to really activate our body's calming system so we can kind of think a little bit more clearly. The second part is just noticing how your body is feeling as you're breathing, and also notice where you might be feeling that emotion. Do you feel hot or cold in any areas? Is there a lot of tension in any particular muscles? Maybe you feel a little pressure on your chest or in any other parts of your body. Maybe you start having a headache, or you notice that you have a headache. There's a lot of different ways emotions come about in the body. So just notice where you're feeling your emotion right now the most. And the third part of this is to try and name the emotion, identify it for what it is. And you know, if it's difficult to give this emotion a name, that's totally okay. And honestly, that's very normal. So instead, maybe try to describe the emotion. Does it feel kind of weighty or dark? Maybe there's a color that you associate with this emotion. Whatever that looks like, just try to describe it as best as possible that makes sense for you. Now, last but definitely not least, a great addition to really any of these practices is technique number 5, which is practicing compassion. Now, this can be done by ending any of these previous 4 techniques with maybe having a statement or a mantra that is something kind that we can say to ourselves, or perhaps something that builds us up rather than tears us down. Here are just a few examples to get you started. There are going to be situations that are outside of my control. I am doing the best that I can with what I have and what I know today. This emotion will pass. I am more than the thoughts that I have in my mind. I have survived so much, and I surely will survive this too. If none of these compassionate statements vibe with you, or they don't necessarily feel true for you right now, that's totally normal. As with any new thought, it takes time for the brain to create a new pathway, and it takes time for that pathway to strengthen. And so with this particular technique and with repetition, we can start building these compassionate, kind, gentle pathways in the brain. It just takes a little bit of time to do so. And the stronger a pathway is, the more true it feels, regardless of the evidence that we can logically find. So start by maybe thinking of some strengths that you have, or perhaps reflect on any compliments that you've ever been given by a peer, a loved one, a friend, whomever. Think about maybe one thing that you enjoy about yourself, or perhaps something that you're really proud of, something that you accomplished. Whatever comes about for you, going through some of these steps or options to create these statements, just see where it takes you and maybe write them down so you can remember them or remind yourself of them every day. If you find any of these techniques helpful, please do hit that subscribe button. And also, I would love to hear from you guys. I want to know how these go, if these are helpful, maybe how you use them, and of course, what other techniques you might be curious about that I can share with you guys on here. Let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time.